Hi everyone, and welcome to the first in the Working with Data training series. In this episode, we will be focusing on some basic formulas that will really help you analyze and understand your data a bit more efficiently. We'll be looking at some basic things like summing, which is a really useful and important formula to know. I'll be showing you 3 different ways to do that, as well as introducing the idea of an absolute value. This is really important for formulas and ensures that you kind of get accurate um, outputs and formulas, and is a really key thing to understand that we'll build on later in the series. For this episode, we will be working with the budget tab of our training data. So I really encourage you to have that open so you can follow along as we go. I'm going to open that now and we can get started. So, as you will be able to see in our spreadsheet on our budget tab, we have a table. Now, down the A column here, we've got rent, rates, light, heat, and then we've got all of the months along the year, and it shows how much each line item is costing or predicted to cost for that particular year. So this is a pretty standard example of a data set that you might get, but as an organization, we might need to do a little bit of analysis on this data to be able to answer some basic questions. So the first thing that we're going to look at is summing. So this is just calculating the total value of of a number of different items. So in this example, we want to understand how much the total budgeted expense for the month of January will be across all 4 line items: rent, rates, light, and heat. There are 3 ways that we can do this, and I'll take you through all 3 now. As always, if you need to take a minute to pause this video and try this out in your own time, I encourage you to do so. So we'll start first of all with the sum formula. Now, this is the most common way of doing this and is a really easy option. You start off, as always, with your formula by typing in your equal sign and then sum, as you can see I've done there. Then you select the array or the range of data that you want to be included. So as we said, we want to understand the total for the month of January. So that selects B4 to B7. And we close our formula, as always, with a close bracket, and we hit enter. And now you can see that in that cell, we have the total sum of the January line items. Now, that's a really quick and easy way of doing that, and that might be a formula that some of you are already familiar with. But there's a few things that we can do now. So we can see that we want to get the same total for all of the months. Now, we could go and manually type in the formula each time, drag it down, close it and hit enter. But that becomes really time consuming, particularly for data that has a bigger data set than this. You might need to do it for 4 years, for example. And it can just get quite time consuming. So what we can do instead, to speed up the process a little bit, is if you do your first formula input, so as we did, we type in equals sum and select our data. We can then hover our little arrow over this cell. Once it's highlighted, you can see it should turn black, and simply drag it along. As you can see there, we've got each month now has been calculated, the total, and we can drag that all the way to the end. And now we have the total value, or our sum, for each month. And if we look in our formula tab up at the top here, you can see that as we've dragged it along, it selected the correct data from each row to give us an accurate picture. Now, that's a really helpful way of speeding things up a little bit. Another way that we can get our sum total is by the alt equals. So how that works is you have your blank box underneath the data that you're looking to fill. You hold down the alt key on your keyboard. On mine, it's right next to my spacebar. So I hold that down and then I press my equal sign, and you can see it has automatically went to find where the data is listed around that empty cell and inputted that formula for me. So really, really helpful. We can do that again here. We select our empty cell, we hit Alt, and we hit equals. And again, it has gone searching for the data next to that empty cell, made an assumption. In this case, it's the correct assumption, and we hit enter. So another really quick and easy way to sum our data. We can delete that because I'm going to show you one more way to auto sum. Now this one is when you're working with bigger data sets, we want to speed this process up. Maybe we don't want to drag it all the way across. We know that we want the total for each of the months, but also the total for each of the line items. So in this instance, we would use auto sum. So how that works is you highlight your data set, making sure that you have a blank cell that they could input the total into for each of the line items that you're looking for. And you go up to on your home tab, you can see here we're on home tab. You go along to the end under editing, there is a button that says auto sum. And if I press that, it automatically calculates for me the total of each month as well as each line item, and then finally an overall yearly cost. So that really helps speed things up a little bit. And I think it's always, as I said, good to play around with this. If you've got a data set, I would encourage you to try those 3 different formulas after you've done the practice one and see in what instance it makes the most sense to use each of those formulas. So now that we've figured that total values out for our months and our line items as well as the end of the year, we can do a little bit analysis on that data set. So you have your data and somebody asks you, okay, that's really good to know, but what would the yearly rate per staff member be? We know how much our rate is for the year because we've worked that out. But actually, we want to work out a kind of unit cost, a per person cost. So what would we do? As you can see here, we have been told the number of staff, that is 12. And so how we would go about doing that is, as always, start with your equal sign. Go and select the cell that you want to figure out your per unit cost of, or your per staff member cost of. In this instance, it is N5 because that is the total for rates, and what we're looking for is yearly rates per staff. We then divide it, and in Excel, hopefully you're familiar, divide is this kind of backward slash here, that means divide. And then we go and type in the number of staff, so which we know is 12, and then we hit enter. And what it's done, you can see up in the formula bar, is taken our yearly rates and divided it by the number of staff. Now, if we wanted to be a little bit more clever with our data, what we would do, instead of actually manually typing in the number of staff, we would use this cell reference. Now, the reason for that is, say you are in the middle of growing your business and you hire some more people, and actually this number changes to 15 staff. As you can see, that formula hasn't updated, and now we have an incorrect yearly rates per staff figure. And what we would have to do is go and manually update it. But if we had worked it out for all 3, that could become quite time consuming. So instead, what I would do is, if we go back to 12, I would, in my formula, type in the cell that we're looking for. As we said, that was N5 for the yearly rates. I would hit divide, and then I would actually select the cell that has that staff number in it and press enter. So you can see we've got the same value here, but if for whatever reason we now go and change the number of staff, we can see that automatically updates. And that just makes our life a little bit easier and means that there are less likely to be mistakes in these big spreadsheets. Now, this whole exercise is about becoming more efficient with data and helping you work more quickly. So if we are asked, okay, that's great, we now know the yearly rate per staff member, but we also want to know the yearly light rate per staff member, how would we go and work out that cost? So we could, of course, go and type it all in, but what we were taught up here is that it's actually much easier to drag it down. It saves us that manual effort of retyping all of our formulas. So I've pulled that down, but something doesn't look right there, does it? It is, as you can see, giving us a kind of 0 value for that, and then 9 for our heat per staff, which we can see is actually around the same-ish value as rates, and therefore definitely shouldn't be 9. Now, why that is happening is when you drag down a formula to the next cell, it automatically moves which cells have been selected, assuming, as with here, when we dragged it across, it automatically moved to column C. When we dragged it into D, automatically moved across to D. And it's doing the same here. So as we can see, our formula is N5B11. And here it is N6B12. And while it's right that we wanted to jump down to N6 to capture the light total, we still wanted to be drawing on the number of staff as its divisible number. So what does that mean? We're going to use something called an absolute value or an absolute reference. So what this means is that once we make the value absolute, it isn't going to change as we move our formula across. It's a very easy and simple thing to do and will really help, as I said, with the accuracy of your formulas. So how do we do that? We look in our formula and we choose the value that we want to be isolated. In this instance, it's B11. We don't want that to change, but we want the other cell value to change as we pull it down. So what we would do is you go to your keyboard and you put in front of both the kind of column and row value this $sign. And what that does is it says, I don't want you to change as I'm pulling the formula down, either the row or the column. So if we hit enter on that, we can see that hasn't changed that value, but it has now changed the values here. It has given us the total light value divided by the number of yearly staff, and we have a more accurate picture there. So that's really the importance of absolute values. It can be really handy, as I said, when you're working with big data sets and you want to be quite quick with moving your formulas around. I would encourage you to practice this on your own, and as I said, with your own data sheets, particularly the 3 different sum methodologies that we used, and then finally your absolute values. Thank you for watching this. Hopefully see you at the next session.